Greetings, healthcare colleagues. My name is Kevin Kawchak. I'm the founder CEO of Chemical Q Device, here to talk about trapped ion quantum computers as a platform for quantum neural networks for neuroradiology. Now, in specific, there's a number of developments. Every time you see FF, like the FTs, is basically this is fault tolerance. Everything wants to go in that direction. And you'll see here, scalable quantum convolutional neural networks, and then in 3D for potential use for MRIs. So MRIs, their raw data is voxels. I'm also going to cover this quantum convolutional neural network that's fully connected as well. Now, there's a big American Physical Society meeting coming up, APS is what they call it, in Las Vegas in March. And if you haven't taken a look at it, it's worth taking a look at. It's got, especially the iontrap hardware is doing pretty well right now. And, it's just, good locale, other tech as well. So I'll go over some questions towards the end. And, for this first one is an abstract. So this is basically from IonQ. And it's their hybrid, quantum convolutional neural nets, increasing qubits. You'll see the qubits are, they're algorithmic qubits, but they're having some success in imaging in specific. And it says for classification. So that's what Chemical Q Device stage 1 is for image classification. And it's kind of a benchmark. You can, classify images to see how well, a specific setup is working. Now, the second one is from Duke. Now, Duke is interesting. They're also working on a smaller, kind of like a miniaturized version. In all these ion trap setups, you have a bunch of lasers, up to 5 or 6, different points, aiming to accomplish different things. So Duke collaborates with Sandia National Laboratory. You'll see this a lot, also with their laser system, AOSense, and it's claiming to have lower heating rates. And then Quantinuum, you can see here, so experimental quantum error correction on Quantinuum, iontrap. And then, basically this is continuing. They have mid-circuit measurement that they focus on, qubit reuse, so basically your qubit system, the hardware doesn't have to have as much as your code does, and you can, do certain things with that. And basically to further quantum error correction as a whole. Now, this paper is specific, I've read it and it's just very specific, but it's to get this advantage of logical over physical qubit operation is a goal right here. And there's various criteria to do that with fault tolerance, analyzing, crosstalk, fault tolerant, unitary logical gate. And then these at the bottom are the ones that have been achieved. Is fault FT, so fault tolerant error detection, FT stabilizer readout, fault tolerant operation of one logical qubit, logical entangling gates, and repetitive QEC cycles. So it's quantum error correction. So that's the main issue, fixing things with lasers. And if you hear somebody that works with the technologies, they say we just work with lasers all day. And, there's, incoherent polynoise simulations, trying to get these to a certain level. In the future, basically, effective noise models for different quantum computing architectures and logical building blocks as well. And then this kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. There's always going to be some level of error in quantum computers. It's just fault tolerant, or can you correct it? You see on the left, non-fault tolerant preparation looks different than on the right, fault tolerant after successful verification. And if you really want to go into that, I recommend this paper. And then here they have non-FT preparation, Hadamard measurement, and at the bottom, error detection. I've heard it, said at one point that you need a qubit to account, for error correction in these setups. And again, I'll have questions on this later. This just goes to show you like where we are today, going into fault tolerance. It's not fully error corrected, but basically having algorithms on multiple logical qubits, increasing complexity while we're still in this noisy intermediate scale quantum era that we're in right now. Now, this particular paper, robustness and explainability. So explainability is a huge thing that people want to achieve. And explainable AI, multi-scale entanglement, renormalization, ANSET, MERA. But in specific, it's an adversarial attack on the system, and it's basically for interpretability. These steps towards that with quantum and basic quantum advantage. So explainability is basically you have something like you have a neuroradiologist that wants to be able to tell what at all these specific steps, what they mean, not just the answer. So the answer would be, in classification, it would be, are they demented, mild cognitive impairment, or are they, non-demented, those types of things. So these are the four that they use, this FGSM as adversarial text on the network of this QCNN. And as you can see, and I'll show you some of the setups here, there's differences. So most of the ones that I've seen before, the quantum convolutional or the convolutional neural network work was classical, and then your quantum aspect, was like something like the quantum variational circuit moving forward. And you'll see there, there's different arrangements with this on this slide. Now, this is the performance that they got. So typically this is the case, your hybrid, which is quantum plus classical. So the purple and green up above are hybrid QCNN accuracy. And then, or that's green. And then purple is multi-quantum, so hybrid QCNNs to get better performance. And keep in mind, a lot of these tasks are still, not up to snuff as far as like, a conventional neural network on a supercomputer, but it's just heading towards that way. And the thing that fixes it is better quantum hardware. The lines at the bottom are lost. So, typically it's two separate graphs, but that's just how this one is. And this goes to show, so the ones on the top are all the same image, and they're different adversarial attacks at the, so what's happening here. And, you see the results are different, and they're using it once again, for explainability. This whole explainability AI is a huge thing, and, as it starts to go more into medicine too. So this is a chart that describes the different attacks that you could do, so this is for XAI, and it shows you, at the different bit planes, what the values are there too. And just in summary with this, so you have tensor networks, MERA features, so they had to implement that as well. And this is all for XAI. Now, this specific paper is interesting because it's using a different, two different methods. So they call it scalable quantum convolutional neural networks. So the big thing here is the first step, you're not using as many qubits. You're using more layers or features, up front. And then the other big thing is this RF train, which is actually reverse fidelity training, done on quantum simulators. Now, the thing that I couldn't quite figure with this paper is where entanglement was happening, because they use angle encoding. And you can still get good results. And I've seen other papers get, okay results with angle encoding. It's just that, they had mentioned entanglement, but typically you have to use IQP. That's the typical approach for that. So you see, so SQCNN increases filters instead of qubits. And then RF train, and I'll show you with this lambda figure. So at this first part, the QCNN with vanilla train, or an SQCNN at this bottom one. So this is the more filters part instead of using more qubits. And then as you go on with the RF train, you can see that there's inherent differences between the convolution up top, pooling and flattening. So this one up top is more traditional. The one at bottom is their approach. The algorithm for the RF train is on the left, and then you can see that the the table 2 here. So what stands out in parameters here, you're only using 4 qubits, right? This is a 4-qubit quantum simulator. Number of parameters 48, number of parameters in the classical CNN filter 50, kernel size 2 to 2, and these all have, and when you're doing quantum networks like this, a better relationship between the number of qubits used, filters, features, these types of things. There's, somewhat good analogies. So in summary, the QCNN, you have to increase in qubits, but the problem is you get barren plateaus. So this is like a programming restriction. It's just an inherent thing that increase of qubits, it kind of works against itself. So this is using a different, increase in filters with fixed number of qubits for greater performance. And this lambda number, this RF train, increases the top one classification accuracy. In other words, their RF train increases classification. And then in general, their SQCNN is going to do better than the QCNN, than a traditional quantum machine learning method in regards to barren plateaus, better with it. So here's lambda here. So basically, you could see as the number of filters and number of qubits increases from 2,8, 3,12 to 4,16, the trend is with more, well, it just depends, right? So the more RF train that they use, so 0.5, actually it is that case. So 0.5 is greater than 0.1, is greater than 0 in the 4,16 here. So red is greater than black, is greater than blue. So the more F train that they use, this lambda function, the better. And again, these traditional QCNN, quantum convolutional neural network, and then this is an SQCNN. So the one on the left, you could see more with the MNEST data set, and you can see it's red at the top there. So in this specific case, it's 0.01, for top one accuracy for lambda. And it just depends. The next one is 0.1. So, that's a parameter that they changed to achieve better accuracy. Now, this next paper is the 3D version of it. It's the voxel, So I think this paper actually came out before the prior one. So the prior one might have had more insight, but I've reviewed this paper before, and it's for point clouds. So raw MRIs, through data re-uploading. And this is the general thing. They kind of squeezed it in here, but basically, if you look at the input cloud, goes to feature embedding, scalable convolutional filter to fully connected network, output logis, and then you have, feedback loops in here. It's trainable layer with equics, those types of things here, with number of qubits being number 4. And then, just using, I don't know if this is, I think this is MNIST data set. They're saying with RF train, as with before, with it just being 2D, that their RF train is, better with, features as opposed to, the other two types that they were using. So basic RF train is better here. And then, looking down, so size of voxels, and I need to further confirm this, but I think the size of voxels for an MRI is 60, 60, 60, something like that. So it's not too far off, as far as what's going into it. So a lot of these atom optimizers standard, this is what, 10 to the -3 learning rate, that's within range. Number of qubits 4, parameters 48. But you see, it's not 2D pixel, so everything's cubed. So your kernel size is 2 cubed, 3 cubes or 4 cubed, batch size 8. Test batch size 128 there too. And then this goes to show, so it's increasing with the number of filters and qubits. We saw this with their other paper too. And, basically they're saying if you're increasing qubits with a traditional QCNN, even if it was, 3D, that they say that fights against, as opposed to this with the barren plateaus. Here's the two algorithms that they use. So the 3D, so this is for the convolutional layer, and then the second one is for RF train. And then the results you see are better. This one with their more of the RF train and red, better results as compared to the 0.01. So this is obviously has implications for medical use. And then like with everything, it just has to get better. And all these experiments that you're seeing and the ones that I've featured in previous weeks, they're all using quantum simulators because the hardware is not quite good enough. And then you're only looking at 4 qubits. So it's getting up in qubits with better hardware and what promises practical quantum computer. And this is these are actually the results in the top right here with top 1 accuracy. So you can see as you go across the data set from their vanilla, which is plain, 90.3% top 1 accuracy, and then just their QCNN 89, and then their SQCNN-3D 93.7. So like in a nutshell, good results with quantum simulators, it's just everything wants to get better because you're still incorporating heavy amounts of classical influence with that. So this other one was medical, and in specific, ischemic heart disease, and it kind of follows the other ones. And I would say it's stronger in the medical side than the other ones, the previous 2, but maybe not as much as it's just a lot of it's just describing fundamentals. And this is the overall process, their data set. So I think this is considered just, they mention a bunch of EHR data, and it's not necessarily an image, but you can see these numbers are quite high. But it goes through a data cleaning process, feature selection, proposed model is here. So this is your, it's fully connected quantum model. So it's the first I've seen. I don't think it's novel, but it might be for this specific application. But a lot of times you'll see the fully connected being the classical part and the quantum doing some other aspect of the code. Now here's the quantum part. So you can see that this is a QCNN. So it's more traditional than say the previous 2 papers, those SQCNNs. But you have convolutional pooling. You have your variational circuit there too. And then with this one, so the proposed model is on the right-hand side. So learning rate tends to -3, atom optimizer, a lot of these are just, kind of standard batch size 32, epochs. They did mention with the epochs that with the quantum, you don't need to go as high because it tends to flatline as far as the results. Like, you've achieved what you've tried to achieve. And then you'll see the fully connected quantum convolutional neural network in the blue. So it's consistently higher than the optimized convolutional neural network. And then these are the competitors to them. And I found others too, but when you're talking about, so they're 84%, they're claiming it was the best. This Maheshwari also did other ones too. So apples to apples, I think that's why they're claiming they're in bold right there. So it just, some of these change a little bit, but at the end of the day, they had mentioned that, it's still, we need significantly higher qubits and lower error rates, to get the results they're looking for. And they used a 20 qubit, quantum simulator for these, basically, which, as with most papers, this is supposed to be a year for a practical quantum computer. So this is an IonQ study. So I've seen results in other papers referring to this specific paper. They had mentioned, maybe 70-something%. They claim up to 100% accuracy. It's a very basic thing. It's just 10 handwritten digits, MNIST database. And there's also a GANs related one. It's not the generative adversarial network. It's associative adversarial network to help it. So again, when you're forming experiments, you really have to figure out what are the strengths of quantum. Is it even possible to come close with the classical, using that specific hardware? And I caught this video. So this gives a good idea of what's going on. Number one, create ions. They need to be cooled. This is in vacuum. Number two, gate computation subsystem. manipulate qubit state, induce coupling. Not a lot of people, I don't think, have seen this particular one. So number 3, computation readout. And the presenter, she said that figured there's 5 or 6 different types of lasers pointing out at these and different things. So you could just imagine that, it needs to be a certain size for robustness. And until things start to like really, get consolidated with operations and miniaturization, this is just how it's going to be, accessing these in the cloud, several refrigerator size for some of these. Now, algorithmic qubits, so this is an IonQ roadmap. They say going into 2026 at 2025, 256. And there's just certain applications, especially, and you see that they're going to APS meeting in Las Vegas, and they're saying image classification is a perfect case. And that's exactly what I'm working on. So, it's just good to see, so many people want to shoot for the moon with gate-based superconducting qubit, like IBM and Google. It's just a matter, like, because you can keep releasing them, but some things like, the bearing plateaus, working against you at higher qubits. It's like with everything, you have to figure out kind of smaller qubits, I guess, is the iontrap. So they're a publicly traded company. It was one of the first news is when I started. This is October 21. I think it was close to $2 billion SPAC IPO deal. Rigetti, 6 days later, I think, announced that they were making plans to go public too. And obviously, as far as the technology, applications, a hardware manufacturing facility coming first half of next year, it's looking like iontrap is, maybe a good decision to get results at this stage. Now, a lot of people have come on and they say, oh, this is awesome, Ticket. So Ticket is Quantinuum's open source network. And basically coming from all different parts of, coders and programmers and developers, they actually say this is quite good. So this is Quantinuum. It's a Honeywell company. And then this kind of gives you an idea of their roadmap, this H1. What Quantinuum's known for is their quantum volume, which is a measurement of quantum, so the qubits over the error. So you want the numerator to be bigger and the denominator to be smaller. And I was on I think it was Washington, D.C. quantum call, and they say, I think it's like 8,000 quantum volume at this time. And they were saying go up by order of magnitude, so that put 80K. And that was done on a 13 qubit. So that might put it up to 100, over 100, something like that. But anyway, that's the goal, more qubits and less error. And there could be breakthroughs too. So they're Fortune 500, big company. Now, what's happened, so in these studies here, these are all quantum simulators. You'll see Penny Lane default simulator, 4 qubits. And the one that's probably the best to go off of is the January 2023 Shawar. And this is, 4,000, so whatever times, 8 times 5, something like 8 times as much, feature vector. It's off a better database, ADNI versus Kaggle, or at least it's, more people refer to ADNI, doing research. But in just looking at this lower right-hand number, 96% for the quantum approach, and then their own classical approach was only 91.9% there. And then here's just an overview of what's going on. So you have a convolutional neural network, classical to quantum variational circuit, run on a quantum simulator, and then your fully connected layer is done classically. So one of the papers I went over today, the fully connected layer was done, this quantum as well. And then this is the flow of data. So from top, and then I'll go left to right. So you're coming in with classical data and needs to turn into quantum. So you have these 4 quantum bits. And then, so that's initialization. You have superpositioning, embedding. And then layers 1 through 6 are basically rotational C0 gates. They're trainable, and then they need to get measured. But keep in mind, with error and all these things, you have to account for that because, just one single error can mess up a rotational gate. And then there's all these other accountants for this. So I wanted to approach this. So it says, so here's a question. So why couldn't this business have been done 3 years ago? And the answer is quantum simulators were primarily the primary research option. Now in 2017-18, the first simulators were by IBM and Xanadu. They continue to be slow. They're limited in qubits, but they're error-free. Now in 2022, 2023, and I just showed the previous chart, the 3 Alzheimer's classification accuracy, showed benefit, just on limited quantum simulators. Now, the answer in this here is NSF practical quantum computer. We'll probably see bumps in both gate-based and non-gate-based. And then also MIT says this is the year, for researchers to consolidate years of hard work. And then also the other answer to this question, why hasn't this, taken off in the last 3, this is their question, is the simulators remain for testing with minor improvements. And then you have iontrap technology closing in on fault tolerance. So that's like, climbing up those steps, getting closer and closer, so we don't have to run as much on quantum simulators. And as I mentioned before, Quantinuum is expected to improve their high quantum volume. IonQ, quantum manufacturing facility, first half of 2024. And then the other question is, what would a customer evaluating the space desire in terms of metrics? So the answer is a customer in neurology would want better, faster, and less expensive medical results. And that's due to quantum's ability to prospectively scale exponentially with data size, model size to make it better. And then quantum is faster due to large problems that classical computing can't be done. I'll show you the example at the bottom. Quantum hybrid systems are expected to become less expensive over time due to hybrid CPU and GPU approaches. So the question is the differentiation 10 times better than an existing alternative? And the answer is not currently in medical, only for very specific tasks. So if you remember the June 1st, 2022 Xanadu of photonics computer, 36 microseconds instead of 9,000 years. If you take 36 microseconds, which is 0.000036 seconds times 10, you won't get anywhere close to 9,000 years. So yes, that one does. And D-Wave, they had an application, it's basically in food, but they'll refer to that often if you talk to them, because that's one of the things you'll see as far as this is non-gate based or quantum annealing, 2 minutes instead of 25 hours. So 2 times 10 is only 20 minutes. So yes, that's 10 times better than the existing alternative. So the question is the advantage algorithmic? Yes, this is based on several research studies and classification accuracy using point quantum simulators. With a practical quantum computer manufacturing facility expected, this should lead to additional advantage. And another question, and this is posed, this is the Stanford kind of thing. What is the trade-off in using the algorithm to get the gains? The trade is waiting, for more practical quantum computers this year and running quantum experiments on a relatively expensive hardware with system noise that continues to improve. Another question, if you prove out the market and a competitor creates a feature identical ripoff of your product, why would a new customer choose you? So Chemical Q Devices is a pioneer in reviewing substantial literature publications in quantum neuroradiology to quickly innovate on products that customers desire. And also, many people will be going after gate, just hybrid gates, CPU, GPU, gate-based. And I'm going further into this is non-gate-based methods and optimizing feature selection, patterns, and matching, all to take a look at. But you have to look at all of the computing technologies. I would say the hot one might be the iontrap right now as far as results go. And then do you view your offering as a product or platform? Why? And the answer is Chemical Q Devices, a multi-stage platform consisting of radiology, imaging, combining products, and FDA submissions. And the last question here, and this is the Stanford, it's Entrepreneur Thought Leader Seminar. So it's very helpful. So if you had to choose from monetization, engagement, or growth, and you had to choose only one, which would you choose and why? So the answer is Chemical Q Device chooses growth because emerging quantum computing poses great potential to benefit patients with Alzheimer's disease. And I've been doing this, researching quantum and medical since, really significantly later in 2021. And it just continues to, see the number of applications, not just in computing, but yeah, internet, you have all these types of, sensing, these types of things. But in specific in computing too, 3 IPOs, over $1 billion plus, people believe in this technology. It just has to get better. Now, the other question is, what will the Chemical Q Device network effects be? And then the existing network is quite good with quantum directors, investors, executives, medical CEOs, investors, and deans. With a global audience. Basically, I've gone to so many other discussions. People have come hosted on mine. So that network and recommendations in specific from that network saying, oh yeah, I've heard of Alzheimer's and quantum computing. There's the startup that does this. This is what helps drive the new network. So a new network, and once it gets going, is known as network effects. The network effects can help Metcalfe's law of revenue. So even though the new network might grow linearly, revenue is expected to grow exponentially. Now, this platform is for hospitals, research institutes, and universities too. People that exist in Alzheimer's research. And you'll see this. So these are the 4 stages lined up. So the first one's image classification, MVP, expected Q3 2023. Number 2, basically supplementing convolutional neural networks with quantum convolutional networks with, these are brain MRIs with like ADNI data. And number 3, explainable AI. The other thing to be determined is the Alzheimer's prediction, and typically the accuracies are lower for that. So as I've seen other papers go out the door in 21, 22, that's an avenue too. And you're talking between healthy control, a stable myocognitive impairment, progressive, and then all the way up to Alzheimer's disease, with those 2. Stage 2 is medical image reconstruction. So this is an FDA type approach. So, deep learning reconstruction, deep learning segmentation are number, 1 or 2. They're very top as far as approvals of, I took a look at over 500 of their, all of their approvals, narrowed it down to less than 200, and then the ones that pop up the most are, reconstruct. This is technically imaging, but they call it radiology, or sometimes it's under neuroradiology, but it's typically, just radiology. Now, number 3, a complex system. So the complex systems that you see these days are like ultrasounds and portable MRIs, and this would combine the 2, so between classification, reconstruction, potentially some hardware component, but not planning on it. And number 4 would be the FDA submissions. And then these dates are pending other factors and slides 74 through 90. Further growth potential lies with quantum neural network segmentation. That's a huge challenge for doctors, is segmentation, and then also GANs, and then for federated learning. But figure the 2 main ones being classification, reconstruction to start with here. And then some of these, I'm going to look for, so there's FDA precedents in a lot of these. So if you have, cerebral spinal fluid and plasma or blood, those had breakthrough devices, but they're only for, one's for early detection, and then you need confirmation after if you get a positive. But if you get a negative, you wouldn't be required for a PET scan or MRI. But still, figure significant volumes of MRIs. And here's the one I was talking about, principle 1 and 2, deep learning reconstruction, automatic segmentation. And these are neural networks, right? So expect to see, and there's going to be lots for everybody here. So in the overview, this kind of breaks it down in specifics. So I'd mentioned stage 1 and 2. So stage 1, having these ADNI, MRI/PET databases, and then developing. And I'll show you. This is kind of like the technical stuff as far as, there needs to be still IEC and ISO as they come off of the quantum cybersecurity and get more general, with, finance, business, medical imaging, radiology, those types of things. And these are benefits in quantum. The big one with this is non-deterministic polynomial time, hard problems. You can't just think of something you want to do and run on quantum. It actually has to be something that it's really good at. And from what I learned today, that's typically, with gate-based, you could do differential equations, you can do linear algebra. So say a non-gate-based or say quantum annealing, you can't typically do differential equations. So there's diagnosis, prediction, validation. You'll see validation a lot in imaging today to rule out cases of hemorrhage and stroke if somebody's suspected to have Alzheimer's. And then there's continually pushing. So this top one is basically these PET imaging conferences, putting people together. And then ADNI 4 is the one that comes after ADNI 3, and this is more neuroimaging clinical trials. I think it's a lot. It's both PET and MRI, but you won't see CT as much. And then here's an example of a setup, and this one in specific is for hyperparameters with quantum. And so this specific one is using significant amounts of the ResNet 34 is classical, and then other quantum layers too. This is the MVP expected Q3 2023, and you'll see it starts at developers and ends at neuroradiologists. This is typical, and explainable AI is flipped, but for most of these, you'll see basically the iterative approach is neuroradiologists saying, oh, okay, this did or didn't work. So that's the MVP for Q3. Here's number 2. So this is basically inserting quantum convolutional neural networks with iontrap type technologies. And then this is the explainable AI. So you'll see the neuroradiologist at the top, iteration. So when it goes down to developers, but it's really hard to do because developers and neuroradiologists typically don't have the same objectives. And then when you go to code something, you have to think about, will it be explainable? And we saw one of the papers taking that approach. And then here's stage 2, accelerated reconstruction. Now this has enormous quantum potential for the whole field. There's so many approaches out there that are machine learning and implementing quantum, sort of QML, QCNNs, QNNs, those types of things, where it makes sense to get quantum advantage. So as you can see, reconstruction, which takes raw data, turns it into an image, is huge. There's already a paper on that. MIT's Seth Lloyd did that one. And then here you go, clinical trials. This one, there's so many MRIs and PETs that are required. So the patients are taking new drugs, and then you need to observe them by imaging. So imagine better images being required in quantum sensing, and then chemical Q device more on the software side of things. Now, stage 3 is this combination between Alzheimer's disease analysis and reconstruction. And then, here's the precedence, between all these, other, stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 3 is more like full systems. And then this is kind of like that approach of, Alzheimer's disease approach improvements, and this is classification and or prediction. And then B, uh, you know, uh, for better images. And then C combinatory D is FDA approval. And it's still TBD with some of these things as far as if it's going to be pure licensing. I just got an invite to a leading East Coast university to go see their Alzheimer's Institute, connected to nearly 100 colleagues of some of the leading healthcare companies in the world. But it can be a mix between licensing, subscriptions, and partnerships. You'll see here's the ask is for medical experts, quantum experts in these fields. And then this competitive advantage, with, some of this FDA studies and literature, always referring back to what other people have done. And, this is definitely in works. The biggest one that's coming up is it not imitatable? That's basically saying, you've done so much research that even if somebody tried to, then you can check that one off as green. This pitch deck is available. And then some of these quotes are very helpful. I'll just skip to the 2023 is basically saying you can, with AI, coarsely you can reconstruct coarsely samples from MRI scans into high quality images. There's a company called Subtle Medical that takes like less scans of an MRI, and then so you don't have to wait as long. Time is an issue. So there's these developments in QCNNs, and then you could see the one I was referring to before, instantaneous quantum polynomial encoding, IQP. I know for sure is entanglement, but you have to keep an eye out for some of these methods because, like I said, with angle encoding, there's Strangeworks paper that said that one in specific, you're not actually getting that benefit of quantum entanglement. Now here's some differences between QML, QNN. So this is an analogous to AI and ML and deep neural networks, or it'd be a deep convolutional neural network, just with qubits. And then this is how it looks. So, you have your input image, prospective computer, your 10 qubits, and there's certain things in the quantum world you can't do. You can't copy data. So you need to have this unitary transformation. And there's some other, there's advantages. It's just unique to to quantum mechanics, like the fundamental properties. And this is, both, gate-based we'll likely see stuff with, but I think for like this application for, imaging, not a ton of qubits needed. They just have to be fully connected, or that's desirable to do kind of interesting stuff. And then getting into number 4 with explainable AI. Now, if you haven't seen it, there's another thing that Worley, he's the CEO of Strangeworks, posted today. Somebody else posted kind of like a transformational video about quantum in 2023. NSF for the longest time has said practical quantum computer. MIT, it'd be less about the quantum hardware than it's by the researchers that have been publishing data, consolidating hard work, and hopefully doing stuff with it now. Now, driving forces, you'll see IBM. The big hospitals that are into this stuff are Cleveland Clinic, NYU Langone, and Mount Sinai Hospital. 2 of those are New York based. And then there are actually a fair number of QML research papers. It's just they all say the same thing. We ran on a quantum simulator. If they did run on quantum hardware, they had to explain a lot of things. And then there's, between iontrap, gate-based superconducting, you have to keep in mind of neutral atom. They could pop up. All it takes is one killer application. Now, if you're a purist, you would say I would need to see many papers in Nature, which iontrap has, relative to the other ones. But, if you just figure out one thing and could do it very well, that's where photonics and silicon spin can come in as well. Quantum annealing, I watched their video this morning, and Alan, the CEO, basically said there's certain things that quantum annealing will always be better at than gate-based superconducting. So you have to keep your eye out, an ear out too. And then, between, so the two that you'll hear about most in the news that have had, articles and big journals, or this iontrap and superconducting qubit. And then this is a breakdown between plasma, cerebrospinal fluid, neuroimaging. The reason why all this is happening is because Alzheimer's Association is a huge market, over $320 billion last year it was estimated. 2050, $1 trillion. A lot of this is caretaker hours, but basically there needs to be additional understanding. The quantum approach to all this is bigger data sets, bigger models as the computers emerge. And that's what's going to open up some stuff, it looks like. A number of nonprofits involved. The mechanism continues to be further understood. And then we have a president that's 110% behind quantum. He's been up in, upstate New York. He's given some good quotes on quantum. Quantum's a government initiative. It's not, industry initiative. A lot of these technologies, such as iontrap, and they call it transmon qubits, in specific, those ones, it started out as government research, NSF going back to early 1980s. And should be able to come on. And interested, if any questions or comments here. And I see some new faces here, which is good. And then Hannah, if you want to come on.
Yes. Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to. I again really enjoyed the talk. One of the things that I was kind of researching myself about is pertaining to, you mentioned some of the error correction, so especially in ion traps. And I know that particularly with IonQ and other companies that are using ion traps, one of the areas that they're looking at is potentially how do they mitigate some of that environmental noise that can sometimes flip, when you have these huge calculations, it's flipping that 0 to a 1, it can make a huge amount of difference, right? And so having certain strategies to kind of mitigate some of that environmental, shield that noise, if you will, is something that I think that there's current research, particularly in IonQ as well. But I wanted to understand what you know about, errors and how they're kind of popping up in ion trap technology.
Yeah, this first paper, so after the APS ones, strategies for practical advantage of fault-tolerant circuit design in noisy trapped ion quantum computers. That's where I was getting most of this. From the video, I watched an hour-long IonQ video, and what it sounded like there is just adding more lasers kind of thing. And then, you have to ask the question, was that leading towards like a practical, more easy to use quantum computer? But that's where I'm getting most of this. Because they say, the FT, so fault-tolerant error detection, FT stabilizer readout, FT operation of one logical qubit, logical entangling gates and repetitive QEC cycles. So there's a lot going on. And if you remember the one slide where it was, the IonQ system and it was vacuum, cooling it down. And then it had like 4 or 5 steps as it goes around that circle.
Right. Yeah, I did see that as well. But I think the other piece was, I think a lot of people are kind of worried perhaps that, if they have something like, for example, data that can be pretty sensitive data, and you can imagine kind of the implication of, if you kind of have this environment, you can have a stray proton, stray electron, stray proton that somehow affects the spin, the amplitude, and the whole thing just changes. So I think that's something that I think, a lot of skeptics would kind of, just being the devil's advocate, if you will, because I know that even, for example, there was I was reading a paper actually on I think it was in Belgium. There was some type of vote that took place for the prime minister or the electoral sort of vote that took place, and one of the votes was off by like 1 bit. And what happened was, initially the person who was going to get voted in actually, she didn't get voted in, but for some reason, believe it or not, some stray electron, or I think it was like a stray X-ray kind of sort of a stray X-ray from the atmosphere, actually interfered with their computer system, and the whole thing just changed to make her get the vote. So it was pretty kind of remarkable, even in classical sort of technology. I can probably also add the paper that I found that from as well. But it was interesting that even in classical implementations that can still take place. So I think in quantum it's even more kind of like, how do we make sure that things like that don't affect the system as well?
Yeah, and I guess two things is the number one, and if you watch, it's or if you buy Chris, it's Worley's book, and it says quantum computing for babies. And it gets down toward the end of it, and it says it's for big problems. So that's mostly, it'll just be a big problem and it's done. Now, classical computers back in the day, they suffered from X-ray, error. They suffered from error, same thing as this kind of stuff too. Now, as far as the quantum error mitigation or correction, from what I understand, it's thought out theoretically to work. It's just we can't get there yet because we don't have the sheer number of qubits, because as far as I know, you need an extra qubit for every qubit to correct error. And we're already kind of qubit strapped to begin with. So there's more studies on that. It's actually, you'll see in LinkedIn profiles, it's QEC, quantum error correction. That's just what they do. There's lots of papers, but I would say the one I posted in the chat for iontrap is really good, because the biggest challenge most people would have is if you're not, fully researched in this area, it's just understanding it.
Right.
But I was able to pick out some pieces as far as saying, these are the FT parts, the fault tolerant parts that have been achieved. They said were achieved, and some things they say, like fault tolerant unitary logical qubit initialization circuit. There's just certain parts of the iontrap setup that they all need this going on. There's actually a Quantinuum slide that says that every different part of your operation, as you add more, adds an additional potential for error to come in.
Right.
Yeah. So anybody else we haven't heard from? There's a number of new people on. I appreciate everybody coming on. I'm curious if any kind of like the radiologists, neuroradiologists, you're free to come on. You could do video too. You should be able to. And then if not, anything as far as, we've been talking about quantum error correction and iontrap. I had mentioned some of the other technologies too. You still have photonics, and you have spin qubits, and, gate-based superconducting, neutral atom. So that's on the quantum side. Now on the medical side, we're seeing more of the data, so the Kaggle databases from Google, the ADNI databases, start to be utilized, which is good. Any questions? If not, Anjali or Monica? And then we also have Walter or Abdali. You can come on. Yeah, there was actually a paper. So do you know John Martini's, Hannah? He's one of the,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
he's like a founder of quantum computing. He, I think it's 2022 papers. One of them had to do with gamma and cosmic radiation, which is still
Ah,
an
okay.
issue.
Hmm.
And there's still error in our phones. It's just significantly lower.
Yep. Yep. Hmm.
I'm assuming if you have more apps open, it only makes it worse.
Right. Right. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I know particularly certain, well, I guess ion traps, but also just even in neutral atoms. I think anything that's kind of actually even in NMR as well, now that I come to think of it. I know for example, at MIT, when they're in the NMR department, they focus primarily on the shielding techniques. So which materials, sort of would be best to kind of control the amount of X-ray, gamma, like you said, gamma or proton interactions with these electrons and these quantum dots and NMR technology. So it's interesting. They're kind of experimenting with different. When I was at MIT, they were kind of experimenting with these different setups of these houses, if you will. That they keep these NMR devices. So it's more of like a trial and error on a big, on a relatively big scale. So yes, so it's a lot to do, but yeah, hopefully, depends on, obviously, like you said, on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the technology, and what are you trying to what are the results, and what is the experiment that you're trying to run, essentially. But yeah.
Yeah, and you could go, I mean, NMR, I've worked on NMRs before, not fixing them, but I've run many experiments as a chemist. And then, for those that don't know, an MRI is basically an NMR. And instead of the sample spinning, the MRI spins around the person. So the person doesn't have to spin. So, that's just the thing, is just we're used to setting spin on our samples and then the machine, but it's the opposite way with MRI. But if you look at that, so I shared that slide as far as medical image processing all up and down, just we're talking about detection mostly. So detection, and then the next stage is, reconstruction algorithm. And then you go further down and you have, segmentation, data analysis. And then after you have that image, now you're talking neuroradiology of having your image and then, doing a QCNN and other, quantum networks on that as the new thing. But yeah, there's just so many areas, and there's Fermilab, I think it's SQCMS, superconducting, center for
Mm-hmm. Yep.
materials and science, something
Material
like that.
science. Yep.
They're building their own quantum computer, and they're building their own quantum sensors
Yeah,
for
that's right.
MRI analysis. So they're doing it, and then Bosch is doing the quantum sensors, for Alzheimer's. You have quantum. They go by NQT, National Quantum Science Technology.
NQTS. Oh, quantum.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think they're mostly in Japan, and
Mhm.
they're like, they're doing like particle accelerators with MRIs, for C13, for cancer.
Right.
It's
Uh-huh.
like really extreme stuff. So I haven't heard too much exactly what they're working on. I know they're at least doing quantum sensing. So you have QST, and then you have the first, quantum computer in healthcare at Cleveland Clinic. But that's, it's gate-based superconducting
Yeah.
qubit, but it's a move into healthcare, right? To actually, there's no IBM manufacturing facility for quantum computers, but they're building one there. I think they have the most total. I think IBM has the most total quantum computers out of everybody combined, something like that. But iontrap is the first to announce a manufacturing facility, which would hint towards some level of figuring things out a lot better.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
first ever quantum computing manufacturing facility. So you piece all these together. It's just like running, if you're, in grad school and you're piecing all this information together and it's all not in one spot, like NMRs,
Yep.
the spectrum that you
Right.
get, and you're kind of like flying a plane blind, because you're just relying on all of your data. And then your data tells you something, and then you can deduce that it's this X molecule or whatever, you're looking at. In the case of MRIs, it's mostly water and fats that it looks at.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other piece as well is because I think you mentioned as well, like some of the layering. You've mentioned it before, but how Chemical Q device is planning on implementing the quantum convolutional neural network in the layers. And I'm not sure if maybe you mentioned it, but regarding like ancillary qubits, I'm assuming that somewhere like in that stack that you kind of demonstrated, any sort of ancillary qubits would presumably get flipped back to zero once the computation has been done. Is that what I'm kind of assuming, or?
I don't know about ancilla bits.
Okay.
To measure, you need a classical bit, and then it shows up on that staff notation. Isn't an ancilla bit just like an extra bit that's just to do one thing?
Yeah, well, essentially, ancillary qubits are basically error correcting qubits. So they basically are there to correct for any sort of, like I said, when you have some of these flips that occur, unnaturally due to phase changes, they essentially combat that by, acting, like you said, just extra qubits, but they act to mitigate those flips, if you will.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's just, that was my understanding kind of from the beginning, is that, we can theoretically do many, many things. It's just that, we haven't gotten to that point of having thousands of qubits and then half of them being for error correction. By the way, you have barren plateaus working against you. So barren plateaus, more qubits, and your landscape, instead of being narrow, to work with, becomes, or instead of wide, it becomes narrow. But that's why I say it's a very specific thing. And for me to see that IonQ is going to APS and they're talking about, image classification as a great thing for theirs, because they can go fully connected. The gate-based superconducting, like IBM and Google and Rigetti, they're limited in connectivity, and even D-Wave, non-gate based, they're all limited in connectivity. So that's where it's like very specific, So I just calculate in my head. I was like, what's the best? What's the one that has the best chance of making it because of all these things?
Right.
Because there's risk involved, when you're picking a hardware platform. Now, keep in mind, the gate-based superconducting qubit is, I think, still by far the best community with Qiskit. They have free simulators. And simulators are going to be a thing probably for a while. Now, the reason why most people use simulators is to test their circuit to see if they're in the right ballpark. Because, there's AWS, there's 5 different hardware technologies. The most expensive one is, say, an IonQ, or I think it's QEra. They're both a penny a shot, so you're probabilistic. And there is a paper, Roche and QC, where they did 1 billion shots. Now, if you did that all on real quantum hardware, that would be $10 million.
Right.
So they probably did the bulk of it on simulators. They didn't say their breakdown, but the other thing that's in the loop here are these dynamic circuits. So it's cutting circuits or programs into pieces and running them. So I know for sure IBM, there was a HPC Wire paper that basically said that IBM might just solely focus on smaller quantum computers instead of millions because they can chop circuits into pieces and run them on, say, 6 or 7 qubits. So
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of that equivalent in iontrap, the other gate-based method. And,
Mm-hmm.
but that could be coming there too, because we're always told, we need millions of qubits, so for those that don't know, the caffeine molecule is 162 qubits. Now, if you want to interact that with other molecules, represented by qubits in a quantum computer, you're talking like thousands, if not millions of qubits, with all the different interact. That's just to display caffeine in the computer. So, I mean, that's where the advantage comes in, is because, quantum can do things, exponentially. Like if you have like 64, qubit quantum simulator, I don't even think we have that amount of RAM on the planet. I don't know. I haven't heard of anything above 50 for, qubits in quantum simulators, but with a real quantum computer in 64 qubits, that's not as big of an issue.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, everything has, because quantum simulator is noise free, but it's really, really slow. And then I don't know, I'd have to investigate more, but I believe simulators are all-to-all connectivity, just like an iontrap.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
But your theoretically most powerful quantum computer is gate-based superconducting qubit, but it just loves noise.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And it's just like, that's inherent to that type of technology. So anyway, we're due for a number of announcements, I think, because of either that MIT paper saying consolidating research, that NSF saying practical quantum computer this year, IonQ manufacturing facility, that, I'm sure people are working overtime in the other hardware technology. It's like you make it or you don't, there's no like in between. Same thing with software too, like in quantum. So it'll be interesting. Any other last questions or comments? You feel free to post in the chat. And then if not, I strongly urge you, if you're able to go to a lot of these conferences. Now, besides me, there's it's called Washington, D.C. on Meetup. And there's a Chicago. There was supposed to be one last night, but she canceled that specific one. And then there's me, some healthcare and quantum computing discussion group on Meetup too. But go to the ones in person if you can. The big one coming up is the APS, American Physical Society in Vegas in March. I would go to.
Mm-hmm. So I am actually going to be hopefully presenting my own work as well at APS. So yes, so I'll be attending.
So we already got one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's very cool. And then for the rest of everybody too, definitely, and don't give up on quantum. Now's a better time to get into it than it was in, late 21, but it felt like it was happening back then too. So. All right, there's no last questions or comments. This is episode 70, February 16th, 2023. Have a good rest of your day and have a productive. We got one last question. We have to learn about quantum hardware. I'll have this deck open. The second half of this deck has a lot. What was I thinking? I did a timeline. It's got like 235 references. It's on my YouTube and on the website. To me, that's the best one, just because it took so long to do, and it kind of gives you an idea. But but for the hardware in specific, this slide. So some of the later slides, it's got the differences between iontrap. It's got the differences between gate-based superconducting, even inside that technology. There's a gentleman, his name is Russ Fein, F-E-I-N, and then he's doing a lot of stuff with neutral atom these days, but he'll do breakdowns of all the different technologies. So that's another good for quantum hardware. Some other people, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn or that kind of stuff. There's Brian Lenihan. He's CEO. He posts all kinds of stuff. He just posted today how they reacted to the first mention of internet. Like it was the first time that Katie Couric and the other broadcasters had heard that word. And then they flashed up what an email address looks like, and they were like confounded. So the history too. And then I think Hannah put one in there too, you know. But yeah, you just gotta, you know, as far as the density of material, finding it all in the right spot. There's quantum computing reports. They do a fantastic job. And even if you get highly technical, there's fact-based, I think it's called fact-based insight, super detailed, you know, hardware reports. There was a really good one. I think it was a 21, and he comes out with it every end of the year. So I think there's a 22 hardware report. I've had these gentlemen on for the as speakers. So here, David Shaw is fact-based insight, and then the other one, Doug Fink for quantum computing report, FINKE, and then the other one, they formed a thing, I think it's called GCI. It's an institute that includes those two. Then I think I've had Andre Koenig, Konig, and there's a fantastic, they do a, you know, somewhat regular, you know, maybe once every week or every other week, what do you call it, a roundtable? So then his thing, Andre Koeg's roundtable, he puts on YouTube. And if you can understand all of that, you're in a really good spot. It's very financial as far as like the specific companies, their fundings, and but and hardware too. They do talk a lot about, you know, both hardware and software. They're, you know, well advanced in their past. So I would check that one out too. Hannah put another one too. But yeah, this has been episode 70, you know, February 16th, 2023. Appreciate all the links, Hannah. Everybody have a good rest of your day and a productive rest of the week. Take care.